Imagine a single battlefield where 80,000 men disappeared in a single day, where the pride of Rome was crushed like dust under the sandals of a foreigner. We are not talking about fiction. We are talking about the day when Hannibal did the impossible, annihilate the largest Roman army ever assembled using only his wits, his terrain, and patience. It was there on the sun-scorched plains of Cannae that the empire bled like never before. And if you think Rome was invincible, it's because you haven't yet met the military genius who dared to stand up to it and won. The Battle of Cannae did not begin in the field, but in the mind of one man. Hannibal Barca knew that he could not overcome Rome by force, so he decided to beat her by intelligence. While Rome counted soldiers, Hannibal counted movements. He didn't just want to win, wanted to teach. In 216 BC, at the height of the Italian summer, he set the perfect stage for the greatest military strategy lesson of all: time. With only 50,000 men, exhausted foreigners, some still wounded from crossing the Alps, he would face the Roman war machine made up of more than 80,000 soldiers. But Hannibal was not afraid of the numbers. He feared predictability. And that's exactly what Rome offered: rigidity, arrogance, and a common plan. It was the beginning of a disaster for the Romans. For Hannibal, it was the day he wrote his name among the immortals. Before Cannae, Hannibal had already done the impossible. He crossed the Alps with a multinational army and elephants, yes, elephants, under the ice, blizzards and attacks by hostile tribes. It was not just a military campaign. It was a cry of despair from Carthage, who saw Rome growing like a devouring shadow. After losing the First Punic War, Carthage was bleeding, without Sicily paying tribute, humiliated. But Hannibal wanted to reverse all this with a single audacious move: to take the war to the heart of Italy. His army wasn't just diverse, it was resilient. Spaniards, Numidians, Libyans, Gauls, distinct peoples united by the same goal: to destroy the Roman imperial machine before it destroyed them. Every step towards the south of the peninsula was a challenge, every victory a warning. At Lake Trasimeno, Hannibal had already given a clear warning to the Senate. He knew how to ambush, he knew how to manipulate the terrain, he knew how to predict moves like a chess master. But Rome ignored it, and he would pay an unthinkable price. If this crossing has already impressed you, imagine what's next. Hannibal had not yet shown everything, and Rome still had no idea what it was about to face. If you're feeling the weight of this story and want to see how far this confrontation goes, he writes in the comments, "I would have followed Hannibal." And of course, leave the like now, because this battle, it's just beginning. While Hannibal burned fields and plundered villages in southern Italy, Rome bled on the inside. Quintus Fabius Maximus, the timer, had understood the enemy. He knew that you couldn't beat a genius in a hurry. He adopted a strategy of attrition, attacking supplies, avoiding direct confrontations, forcing Hannibal to move tired. It was sensible, it was effective, but it was slow. And the Roman people did not want slowness. He wanted revenge. He wanted glory. He wanted to see legions marching with banners raised. The Senate began to crack. The burning fields stifled Roman pride. Merchants complained of losses. Citizens demanded action, and politicians sniffed votes in the blood of the battlefields. Prudence turned to cowardice, and the thirst for a crushing victory made Rome commit its most fatal mistake: gathering the largest army in its history and delivering it into the open field just where Hannibal wanted it. Cannae would not be a simple battle. It would be the mirror of the wounded pride of a republic about to collapse. Rome decided to crush Hannibal with numbers. The plan was simple: assemble the largest army ever assembled by the Republic. 8 full legions, reinforced by auxiliary troops and allied cavalry. More than 80,000 soldiers marched south, gleaming shields, banners blowing in the wind, and songs of victory echoing through the fields. But there was an invisible crack within this human wall, 2 consuls in charge, alternating power each day. Lucio Emilio Paulo was experienced, cautious, defender of Fabio Maximo's strategy. Gaius Terence Varro, on the other hand, was populist, impulsive, and despised waiting. For him, victory came by brute force, and according to the Roman constitution, each day decided the course of the war. Hannibal watched all this with a hidden smile. He knew that he was not facing a general, but a divided system. He knew that sooner or later a mistake would come, and he just had to be ready. Rome marched into battle with steel armor and a broken heart. It was late July 216 BC when the 2 armies met on the hot plains of Cannae, near the Ophanus River. The venue seemed perfect for Rome, wide, straight, ideal for large formations and direct confrontations. But it was Hannibal who chose him. The river would protect one of its flanks, and the wind, the dry, southeast wind, kicked up dust straight against Roman eyes. Every detail was calculated. Days before the battle, there were minor skirmishes. Emilio Paulo avoided confrontation. He knew the danger. But the next day, the command passed to Varro, and he didn't hesitate. He ordered immediate combat formation, with legions compressed into the center and cavalry on the flanks. It was brute force against intelligence, and on the other side, Hannibal drew the movement that would change military history forever. A convex formation in the center, flanked by troops that seemed to be in retreat but were ready to attack. It was like seeing a wolf pretending to be a lamb. On the morning of August 2nd, under clear skies and biting winds, soothsayers on both sides performed their rituals. But only Hannibal knew exactly what was going to happen. The first clash came with the cavalry. On the Roman left flank, Hasdrubal unleashed the Hispanic and Gallic heavy horsemen against the Roman cavalry. Squeezed between the Opantus and the enemies, the Roman knights were quickly annihilated, drowned, trampled underfoot, crushed. Meanwhile, the Roman center marched in a tight formation, a wall of shields and gladius. The soldiers sang hymns, sure that they would crush the enemy with sheer force, but Hannibal had masterfully positioned his men. The Gauls and Spaniards were in the front line, but they would gradually retreat, pretending to give in to the pressure. The convex line began to bend, to sink, and the Romans, thinking they were winning, quickened their pace, compressed their ranks, and went even deeper into the trap. It was like watching a snake swallow its prey slowly. As the Romans advanced, the Carthaginian formation retreated in perfect synchrony. The initial convexity has turned into an enveloping concavity. It was the embrace of death. The Roman center was compressed, not by strategy, but because there was no room for anyone else. The impetuous advance on narrow ground crushed the ranks. The soldiers at the front were barely breathing. Those in the back pushed. Communication between officers was lost. And then Hannibal's real plan began. On both sides, the African veterans, fresh, intact troops who had not fought until then, advanced. They attacked the flanks of the Roman mass with long, precise, sharp spears. The legionnaires, caught in the grip, could not even turn their bodies to react. It was as if they were being stabbed by invisible walls. Within seconds, confidence turned to panic. The Roman countryside had turned into an iron box, and the lid was yet to come. For Hasdrubal now approached from the rear with all the Carthaginian cavalry. With the flanks broken and the soldiers being torn apart with no chance of response, all that remained was to close the final door. And it came like thunder of hooves. Hasdrubal, with the Carthaginian cavalry, hit the Roman rear with full force. Now the Romans were surrounded on all sides, Spaniards and Gauls at the front, African veterans on the flanks, and the cavalry in the rear. There was no more room. The soldiers were squeezed like cattle into a pen of death. They could not escape. They could not fight. The human pressure was so intense that the men died of asphyxiation, trampled on, crushed by their own companions. The orders ceased. The screams turned to moans. The eagles of the legions, sacred symbols of Rome, disappeared into the chaos. Paul, the prudent consul, died sword in hand, trying to stem the tide. With his own life, Varro, the architect of the tragedy, fled with a handful of knights. He survived, but he lost everything: honor, career, and the respect of a city in mourning. When the last scream ceased, the battlefield looked like a desert of bodies. Ancient historians speak of 70,000 Roman dead in a single day, the equivalent of 8 entire legions. Thousands of allies, officers, and all cavalry were wiped out. Capua, the second most important city on the peninsula, opened its gates to Hannibal. In Sicily, rebellions broke out. Macedonia signed an alliance with Carthage. For the first time in centuries, Rome had to face the possibility of being destroyed. But the true essence of Rome has emerged from the ashes. Instead of negotiating, the Senate reacted with fury and faith. He summoned all eligible citizens. He freed slaves, formed new legions, mobilized every muscle of his republic. And more, he abandoned his pride. He returned to the tactics of Fabio Maximo. He avoided direct battles, and slowly he isolated Hannibal in Italy. The lesson of Cannae was painful, but it forged a new army, one that was more flexible, more intelligent, more resilient. Rome bled, but he learned. Cannae was not just a defeat, it was the scar that Rome never forgot. And precisely for that, it was what saved her. The Senate understood that courage without strategy is suicide, that discipline without adaptation is prison. Years later, when Scipio Africanus faced Hannibal at Zama, he would use the same Carthaginian tactics against his own master. There, the cycle closed. But it all began on the plains of the Ophantus River, where the bones of fallen legionnaires mingled with Italian earth. They died with the Roman eagles on their chests. But from those ashes a new Rome was born, harder, more astute, more ruthless, and it was this new Rome that rose up, conquered the Mediterranean, and wrote with blood and iron the word empire. Hannibal's lesson survives to this day in military academies around the world, because Cannae wasn't just a battle, it was the masterpiece of military genius, and also the point where Rome ceased to be a wounded republic and began to become eternal. Cannae was Rome's biggest defeat, but it was also the beginning of his transformation. It was there, in that field soaked in blood and honor, that the Republic realized true power is not only in strength, but in the ability to learn from pain. If this story impacted you, it made you see Rome in a different way, writes in the comments, "From the ashes is born true strength." Leave the like so that this memory is not forgotten, and subscribe to the channel, because here the story is never told in an ordinary way. Here it breathes, here it pulsates. See you in the next battle.